Have you ever felt like life is moving too slowly, like your dreams are stuck just out of reach? What if I told you that everything you've been waiting for is already on its way, but it can't arrive until you stop pushing, stop forcing, and start trusting the process? In the next few minutes, you're going to discover how letting go can actually speed up your journey, bring clarity, and open doors you never even knew existed. This isn't just motivation. It's a guide to receiving exactly what's meant for you. Most people believe that control is strength. They think that if they plan harder, push more aggressively, and hold tighter to outcomes, they'll guarantee success. But control is often just fear trying to feel productive. It's the mind saying, if I don't manage every variable, something will go wrong. That mindset doesn't create power, it creates tension. And tension blocks clarity, adaptability, and timing. Control assumes that life is something to be dominated. Alignment understands that life is something to be worked with. When you try to control everything, you narrow your vision. You become obsessed with one path, one outcome, one version of success. Alignment, on the other hand, keeps you responsive. It allows you to adjust without panic, to pivot without losing confidence, and to recognize opportunities that don't look like what you originally planned. When someone is in control mode, their decisions are driven by urgency. They rush conversations, overcommit, and cling to people, roles, or outcomes that no longer fit. They interpret resistance as a signal to push harder, but resistance is often feedback. Alignment listens to that feedback instead of fighting it. It asks, is this obstacle telling me to force or telling me to refine? Alignment doesn't mean passivity. It doesn't mean sitting back and hoping things work out. It means taking deliberate action from a grounded state rather than a desperate one. When you're aligned, your actions are clean. There's no emotional static behind them. You move because it's the right move, not because you're afraid of losing momentum or falling behind. One of the biggest costs of control is that it disconnects you from timing. You might be skilled, you might be capable, but if you're early, you'll be rejected. If you're late, you'll be ignored. Control tries to override timing. Alignment respects it. It understands that readiness is not just about ability, it's about context, positioning, and maturity. People who live in alignment often appear calm, even when things are uncertain. That calm is not ignorance, it's trust in their preparation. They don't need immediate confirmation that things are working. They know that if their actions are consistent and their direction is true, results will surface in the right window. This internal stability makes them magnetic. Others feel safe around them. Opportunities move toward them without pressure. Control demands guarantees. Alignment accepts uncertainty. And paradoxically, that acceptance creates more leverage. When you are not trying to squeeze life into your expectations, you create space for outcomes that are better than what you could have planned. You notice patterns. You sense when to advance and when to wait. You stop wasting energy on what resists you and invest it in what responds. Control asks, how do I make this happen right now? Alignment asks, who do I need to become so this happens naturally? Most people interpret delay as rejection. If something doesn't happen quickly, they assume it's not meant for them, that they missed their chance, or that they weren't good enough. This belief quietly destroys momentum. Delay is not absence of progress. It's often evidence that progress is happening beneath the surface. What looks like nothing is usually preparation unfolding out of sight. A delayed win exists because immediate success would have created fragile results. Timing protects outcomes from collapsing under untested pressure. When something arrives too early, it demands skills, discipline, and emotional control that haven't been built yet. Delay gives you time to develop the internal structure required to hold what you're asking for without losing it. Most growth happens in the waiting period. Character sharpens when rewards are postponed. Patience isn't learned through success, it's learned through restraint. Delays force self-evaluation. They expose weaknesses in consistency, focus, and resilience. Without delay, those weaknesses would stay hidden until they caused failure at a higher level. Delayed wins also correct entitlement. When results don't come instantly, you're forced to earn confidence rather than borrow it from outcomes. You learn to trust your process instead of chasing validation. This internal stability changes how you show up. You stop negotiating your standards. You stop cutting corners. You stop performing for approval and start operating from self-respect. Another reason wins are delayed is misalignment between desire and readiness. Wanting something doesn't mean you're prepared for its responsibilities. Every opportunity comes with a cost. Expectations, scrutiny, pressure, maintenance. Delay gives you time to expand your capacity so that when the opportunity arrives, it doesn't overwhelm you or expose you. Delayed wins also recalibrate perspective. What you wanted at the beginning is often not what you actually need. Time refines intention. It removes ego-driven goals and replaces them with grounded ambition. By the time the win arrives, it fits who you've become, not who you used to be. That's why it feels different. It doesn't feel chaotic or intoxicating. It feels earned and stable. Many people quit during delay because they mistake silence for failure. But silence is where most transformations occur. No applause, no confirmation, just repetition, discipline, and quiet belief. This phase separates those who are committed from those who are attached to outcomes. Commitment continues without reassurance. Attachment collapses without reward. Delayed wins also teach discernment. You learn when to persist and when to release. You become more selective with your energy. You stop chasing everything and start choosing carefully. This focus compounds effort. Instead of scattering attention, you deepen skill. Instead of forcing exposure, you build mastery. When the win finally arrives, it doesn't feel sudden. It feels inevitable. Looking back, the delay makes sense. The mistakes, the waiting, the refinement, the uncertainty, all of it contributed to stability. The delay wasn't a detour. It was the path itself. Most people chase outcomes believing that success will change who they are. They think confidence comes after achievement, discipline comes after reward, and clarity comes after recognition. But outcomes don't create identity. Identity creates outcomes. What you consistently receive from life is a reflection of who you are being, not just what you are doing. Identity is the lens through which decisions are made. Two people can take the same action, but the one acting from a stronger identity produces better results. When identity is unstable, effort becomes inconsistent. Motivation rises and falls based on external feedback. But when identity is solid, behavior stays steady even when results are slow or invisible. This is why temporary success often collapses. If someone achieves something without upgrading their identity, the outcome becomes uncomfortable to maintain. They sabotage, retreat, or burn out because the external result exceeds their internal self-concept. Identity sets the ceiling for what feels normal. Anything above that ceiling triggers resistance, doubt, or fear of exposure. Becoming precedes receiving. The version of you who can hold what you want already exists in potential, but it must be built deliberately. That version thinks differently under pressure, manages emotion with restraint, and acts with consistency rather than intensity. Outcomes align naturally when behavior matches this internal structure. Identity-based growth shifts the question from "how do I get this" to "who do I need to be?" That question changes everything. It redirects energy away from shortcuts and towards standards. It removes obsession with speed and replaces it with precision. Instead of chasing visibility, you build competence. Instead of chasing approval, you develop authority. Most people try to motivate themselves with external rewards. Identity removes the need for motivation. When actions align with self-image, behavior becomes automatic. You don't need willpower to act in accordance with who you believe you are. The work gets done because it matches your standards, not because you're forcing yourself. This is why habits tied to identity are more powerful than goals tied to outcomes. Outcomes are temporary. Identity is persistent. When your identity shifts, behavior follows without constant effort. You stop negotiating with yourself. You act in alignment even when no one is watching, even when there's no immediate benefit. Identity also determines what you tolerate. Low identity accepts chaos, inconsistency, and disrespect. Elevated identity rejects misalignment without emotional drama. You don't need to explain your standards when you live them consistently. People adjust or remove themselves. Opportunities respond accordingly. The delay between effort and reward is where identity is formed. Anyone can act when results are visible. Few can act when results are absent. That gap is where self-trust is built. Each disciplined action without recognition reinforces identity. Over time, that identity becomes undeniable. When identity is prioritized, outcomes stop being chased and start being attracted. Results arrive not as surprises, but as confirmations of who you have already become. Letting go is often misunderstood as surrender, weakness, or loss of ambition. In reality, it is one of the most disciplined actions a person can take. Letting go does not mean you stop caring, it means you stop gripping outcomes with fear. The tighter the grip, the more distorted your judgment becomes. Fear-driven attachment narrows perception and pushes people into reactive decisions. Power comes from choice, not attachment. When you are attached, you are controlled by the possibility of loss. Your behavior becomes defensive. You over-explain, over-pursue, and overextend. Letting go removes that leverage from external circumstances. You regain internal authority because your sense of self is no longer dependent on a specific result. Attachment creates urgency. Urgency erodes strategy. When something feels like it must happen immediately, patience disappears and mistakes multiply. Letting go slows the mind. It creates space between stimulus and response. In that space, clarity emerges. You begin to see options instead of threats. Decisions become intentional rather than impulsive. Letting go also restores balance. When you are overly invested in one outcome, you neglect other areas of growth. Your identity compresses around a single goal. Detachment allows expansion. You continue building skills, strengthening discipline, and refining character without placing your entire self-worth on one result. This balanced development increases resilience and long-term stability. Another overlooked aspect of letting go is that it improves communication and influence. People sense when they are being needed rather than chosen. Neediness repels. Detachment attracts. When you let go, interactions become cleaner. You listen better. You speak with calm authority. You are not trying to convince or impress. This emotional neutrality makes your presence more compelling. Letting go also exposes truth. When you stop forcing connections, roles, or outcomes, what is genuinely aligned stays and what isn't falls away. This isn't loss, it's filtration. Misaligned situations drain energy and delay growth. Releasing them creates momentum in the right direction, even if it feels uncomfortable at first. Emotional maturity is measured by how well someone can release without resentment. Letting go without bitterness requires self-respect. You acknowledge effort without clinging to entitlement. You accept reality without self-blame. This level of composure strengthens identity and sharpens decision-making under pressure. Control says, "I need this to work." Power says, "I'll be fine whether it does or not." When you let go, you stop signaling desperation to life. You communicate readiness instead. You move with patience rather than panic. You act from confidence rather than fear. Opportunities respond differently to this energy. They meet you where you stand instead of making you chase. Letting go creates psychological space. In that space, creativity, discipline, and strategic thinking return. You no longer waste energy rehearsing worst-case scenarios. Your focus shifts back to execution and growth. Over time, this becomes your default state, calm, deliberate, and grounded. What you release stops controlling you. What no longer controls you stops limiting you. Most people only trust progress they can see. Numbers, recognition, results, and feedback become the proof that convinces them they're moving forward. When those signs disappear, doubt enters quickly, but the most important progress happens before any visible confirmation appears. What you don't see is often more valuable than what you do. Invisible progress is internal. It shows up as improved decision-making, emotional regulation, discipline, and self-awareness. These changes don't announce themselves. There's no applause for restraint, no metrics for patience, no spotlight on consistency. Yet these are the traits that determine whether visible success will last once it arrives. This phase is uncomfortable because it feels unrewarded. You're putting in effort without validation. You're refining habits without recognition. You're showing up while the external world remains quiet. This silence creates psychological pressure. It tests whether your commitment is genuine or conditional. Many people quit here because they mistake discomfort for stagnation. Invisible progress also restructures how you respond to failure. Early on, setbacks feel personal. Over time, they become information. You stop reacting emotionally and start analyzing objectively. This shift marks real growth. The absence of visible success forces you to strengthen your internal feedback system instead of relying on external approval. Another form of invisible progress is tolerance. Your capacity to handle stress, uncertainty, and delayed gratification expands. Situations that once overwhelmed you now feel manageable. This increased tolerance isn't dramatic, but it's decisive. When opportunities arrive with pressure attached, your nervous system is ready to handle it. Invisible progress also sharpens discernment. You become more selective with your energy. You stop reacting to every distraction. Focus deepens. Standards rise quietly. This refinement doesn't create noise, but it changes trajectory. Instead of scattering effort, you begin compounding it. Consistency without reward is one of the strongest indicators of future success. Anyone can perform when results are immediate. Very few can maintain discipline when there's no visible return. That ability is built during periods of invisible progress. Each repetition strengthens identity, reinforcing the belief that action doesn't require external validation. This phase also weakens ego. When there's no audience, motives become clear. You discover whether you're driven by growth or by appearance. This honesty is uncomfortable but necessary. Ego-based goals collapse without attention. Purpose-driven effort continues quietly. Invisible progress prepares you for visibility. When results eventually appear, they often arrive suddenly. To others, it looks like an overnight success. But internally, it feels earned. The habits are already in place. The emotional stability is already there. The pressure doesn't feel threatening because you've already been training without applause. The danger is not that invisible progress isn't happening. The danger is abandoning the process because it doesn't feel rewarding. Growth doesn't always feel like improvement. Sometimes it feels like repetition, restraint, and silence. Those who learn to trust this phase gain an advantage that can't be rushed or replicated. Uncertainty is unavoidable. Chaos is not the absence of order. It is the absence of understanding. When situations become unpredictable, most people search for guarantees. They want clear signs, fixed timelines, and reassurance that their efforts will pay off. When those assurances don't appear, anxiety takes over and decision-making deteriorates. Certainty is often misunderstood as knowing exactly what will happen. In reality, certainty is internal. It is the confidence that you can adapt, respond, and recover regardless of outcome. This form of certainty does not depend on external stability. It comes from competence, experience, and self-trust built over time. Chaos exposes emotional habits. Under pressure, people either contract or stabilize. Those who contract look for escape routes, blame, or shortcuts. Those who stabilize slow down, assess, and act deliberately. The difference is not intelligence or luck, it is training. Certainty in chaos is developed through repeated exposure to uncertainty without abandoning discipline. One of the biggest threats during chaotic periods is impulsive action. Movement feels productive, even when it's misdirected. Certainty allows you to pause without panicking. It creates patience in moments where others rush. This restraint protects resources, time, energy, reputation that impulsive decisions often damage. Certainty also strengthens leadership, even in personal contexts. People instinctively look for calm signals when conditions are unstable. Emotional regulation becomes influence. When you remain grounded, others trust your judgment. This doesn't require loud confidence or dominance. It requires consistency and clarity in behavior. Chaos tests identity. When familiar structures dissolve, people who rely on routines or external validation feel lost. Those with a strong internal framework remain anchored. Their sense of direction comes from values and standards, not circumstances. This internal compass reduces fear and prevents overreaction. Another benefit of certainty in chaos is adaptability. When you're not emotionally attached to a specific outcome, you can pivot without resistance. You notice subtle changes. You adjust strategy early instead of reacting late. This flexibility increases survival and success in unpredictable environments. Certainty also reduces exhaustion. Constant worry drains cognitive and emotional energy. When you trust your ability to respond effectively, mental noise decreases, focus sharpens, execution improves. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios and redirect attention toward controllable actions.